will finish tomorrow. So is this like a propaganda video? I'm guessing it is. Know your allies and know your enemies. It's a wartime video. Okay, perfect. For American soldiers. "24-hour stream." Yeah, that must be like a record, right? Longest stream ever. Damn, this is old school, bro. This is gonna turn into a video, so. Yeah, guns were used.
About a man who made that touchdown. It was won by a team, and every man on the team had a share in winning it. We're playing another kind of a game now, only this one isn't for fun. It's for keeps.
Oh, damn.
And this game won't be won by any single player either.
I love the footage, the World War II
A
footage.
team called the United Nations. The ball will be carried by the men in the backfield. The tough little guy from China, Big Joe Russia, John Britain, and a guy called Yank, the four greatest
Yank.
backs in the world. So let's take a look at the men who carry the ball with us. Who are they? How do they live? What makes them tick? Let's start with the one that's toughest to understand. The one we know just enough about to confuse us. John Britain.
John
Here's where
Britain.
he lives. A little island no larger than the state of Idaho. 500,000 people live in Idaho. 96 times that many live in Britain.
Wow. My great-grandma is 100 years old and still remembers the warriors like they were yesterday. She has high opinions of the Americans as they always behave themselves and help British civilians. Yeah, I could imagine so. The US and the UK have always been, well, not always, but you know, recently been very good allies.
But there are more people on a square mile of Britain than a square mile of Germany or Italy or Japan. More congestion than practically any place on earth except the New York subway or a sardine can.
Very dense, yeah.
And that's a clue that explains a lot about John Britain. We build front porches on our houses because we didn't want to miss the chance to see our neighbors. But John Britain hides himself in a little box and plants a hedge around that to make sure he doesn't. Living that close to neighbors, privacy is part of the pursuit of happiness. And in the sardine can called Britain, they learn to get on with their neighbors. They have to. He's too damn close. That's why they have so little crime in Britain. Believe it or not.
Okay, so that's actually really interesting. I remember that in the UK, they refused to segregate their pubs to accommodate the American soldiers, and if the Americans made fun of a fuss about it, they would make the pubs black only to spite them.
In
Wow.
wartime, the British cop does not
That's
carry a
cool,
gun,
for sure.
nor does the professional crook. And in 1926, when the world heard of this stoppage of work in Britain,
People don't carry guns in the UK, okay,
the
apparently.
whole life of the country had been
I've heard that.
paralyzed by
Police
a
officers in
strike.
Britain don't carry
We were
guns.
still more surprised next day to learn that the strikers were playing football with the cops. You can only understand that if you live in a sardine can.
A sardine can. I don't know how
This guy on our team.
nice that is, you
No part
know.
of Britain is more than 100 miles from the sea. Every day for hundreds of years, years of peace and years of war, John Britain has seen ships sail from his island to the seven seas. That means that whenever
Royal
John
Navy,
Britain wants
baby.
to bust out of his sardine can, it's the sea that gets him. He's been busting out for hundreds of years, and that led to Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Canada, and for that matter, the United States of America.
Yeah, that is true though.
How did John Britain get on our team? Remember 1938? The Yankees won the pennant. Wrong way, Corrigan. The last trains ran on the 6th Avenue L. Well, John Britton got excited.
Only elite police units have guns. The rest have tasers. Wow. That is so foreign to me. Like, I'm just used to policemen carry weapons, especially in America. I mean, I don't live in America, but I travel a lot, and whew, it's scary, boy.
About the same sort of
It is scary.
the bet he had on the Derby, or, as he would say, the Derby. His job, his kids, getting his exercise on his day off. Preston North End taking the football cup.
Football,
Only
interesting.
200
You know,
miles
he's
away,
calling it
people were
football.
cheering another kind of event.
Oh.
And in London and every other British city and town, they read about what was going on in Europe, and they got sore about it. But they were also pretty well determined.
Renewed violence in Germany, yeah.
Then,
So
this looked bad.
this was the time of Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain decided that he was gonna appease Hitler, and right now we are seeing Hitler demands Sudetenland annexation from Czechs, and yeah, not a great decision. Although I can't also blame him that much. You know, people wanted to avoid another war. Great thing. Same thing for my great grandfather. He was part of the Danish resistance against Germany. He was about to fight against Germans in Berlin, but the war ended. Sadly, he's dead now. Well, I'm so sorry for your loss, Gustav Mortensen.
The Czechs
But
had a
those are
mutual
cool
resistance
stories for
pact
sure.
with France. And France had won with Britain. This might mean war, even though everyone was anxious to avoid it.
Yeah, that is true.
They'd been through one war, perhaps been wounded. Hundreds of thousands of their brothers and friends had been killed.
In World War One, yeah, that was
There
very
was nothing
traumatic.
beautiful to them about war, and they had no desire for another.
By this point, World War One was very recent.
The Prime Minister today flew to Munich.
All was well. Britain, France, Italy, and Germany were signing a pact at Munich. A pact in which the Germans agreed they had no further territorial claims to make. It was to be peace in our time. But it turned out to be a strange sort
Yeah,
of
the famous scene of Neville Chamberlain waving the signed paper, claiming that he was at peace with Germany, or that he just avoided a war,
peace.
which sadly wouldn't be
Hitler's
true.
first move was to break the pact he had signed.
Hitler invades Czechoslovakia.
Wishful thinking was ended. Now they knew something had to be done about Germany.
They approved the Conscription Act, the first peacetime conscription in British history, just as the Selective Service Act was the first in American history. The British had put their cards on the table. They had, in effect, said to Hitler,
That's enough. If you go into Poland, we'll fight.
Hitler smiled. Like other would-be conquerors of Britain, Philip of Spain, Napoleon, Kaiser Wilhelm, he thought he understood the British. He didn't. The sleeping lion began to wake up.
Damn.
Lion for the first 6 months of the war. He snapped and growled. But he dropped more leaflets than bombs. He hoped that common sense would return to the German people, and that they would throw out Hitler and the German warlords. Instead,
At dawn this morning, the German armies, without warning, invaded the neutral countries of Luxembourg, Holland, and Belgium.
The King of the Belgians today surrendered his armies of more than 500,000 men.
Belgium,
Marshal Pétain, as French chief of state, has asked for an armistice. The ensuing
France.
fight is ended.
Britain was alone. Czechoslovakia occupied, Poland defeated, Denmark gone, Norway gone, Holland, Belgium, France gone, only Britain now.
Yeah, Hitler absolutely underestimated the British and their will to fight, and he thought they were gonna surrender. He thought, I think, because Britain rarely sees war at home because they're an island and they're very isolated, and Napoleon couldn't cross the channel across to England. World War One, there wasn't much. There wasn't any fighting in England. So now Hitler said, "Oh, if I scare them, they will surrender." Right? As we knew for later, they would never surrender. Literally, quite literally. My great grandmother dad was a World War One veteran. He also served in the Second World War. Imagine spending 4 years in war only to go to war for another 6 years. Must be a brutal experience serving on both of the most atrocious wars in human history.
Britain
Wow.
was alone.
Yeah, pretty
Hitler
scary.
considered the war over. Everybody considered the war over except the British. At the 11th hour, the lion was finally...
Okay, are you guys having trouble with the stream? Okay, so I don't know. I'm getting an error on my part, but you know, you guys can tell me if the stream is okay. It's interesting that one of the black and white maps, instead of using red and blue that represents good guys and white bad, with black neutral with gray. Yeah, it is true. It is true. No, it's good, huh? Well, I guess it must be a YouTube thing. But if you see any error or glitch, you guys can tell me.
aroused.
I'm not seeing any issues. Okay, perfect.
Whatever the cost may be, we shall fight
On the
on
beaches.
beaches,
We shall fight on the landing grounds.
in fields, in streets, and on the hills. We shall never
Surrender. I love that speech. Definitely one of my favorites.
For a year, they took everything that the Nazis could throw at them. For a solid year, from June 1940 to June of 1941.
The
they were
bombing of
only
England,
major
true,
power
this was
fighting the
this was
greatest war
brutal.
machine in the world. They took body blow after body blow. Solid punches before they even had their guard up. All they did was take it on the chin and hang on to the ropes.
Yeah, and this was one of the few times that England saw bombings. And this was really bad for the English people, but they never surrendered. They didn't. This
They
didn't
never
broke
went
them.
down.
They hold firm.
And while they buried their dead, they prepared grimly and defiantly for the day when they could strike back. There were no victories to cheer them on. Just defeat
Hello,
after
Fritos. How are you doing, my man?
defeat. Some heroic, like the beaches of Dunkirk.
Dunkirk,
Or
of
like
course.
the hills of Greece, where British soldiers landed to keep their pledge of honor to the Greek people.
What the hell are you watching? We're watching Know Your Ally, Britain. So this is a World War II video for American soldiers to get to know. It's more of getting to know the history of Britain, why they are in the war, what did they suffer.
Landed knowing they were facing overwhelming odds. But some less glorious. Hong Kong
And I have COVID, dude.
and Singapore and Burma. But through all these long months, the British people were thinking and planning and working only for the day when they themselves could take the offensive. And that day came.
Yo, shit, I hope you're doing well. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. You know, it's just a little sore throat and that's it. I wonder if the British actually thought they could win without America or the Soviets. People in charge must have been betting on one of them joining. Yeah, I think Winston Churchill was betting on America to join at some time. And I think after the invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, the Soviets were pretty much in the war. So I think, yeah, Winston Churchill was pretty much betting on America to join at any time. Yeah, I will be reacting to Crowd, particularly the vodka video, the why vodka ruined Russia. Gosh, you just gotta love the footage of World War II. This is not.
The British that made the Germans realize
This is kind of
the war
rare.
could be brought to German soil too. Day after day, night after night.
Munich, Nuremberg, Kiel. Yeah, of course. Because Hitler bombed London because of an accident, then the British felt they could bomb a lot of the German cities, right? Because the Germans bombed civilians, so now it was the British turn to bomb civilians. Churchill was reportedly happy that Germany attacked Russia since he had a friend in Europe fighting. They, yeah, yeah. Berlin.
The offensive continues in greater and greater strength. That's in the air. And on the ground, 1,500 miles away in North Africa.
The scale of this war was insane. Fighting in Asia, Africa, Europe. I always talk about how Mexico joined World War II, El Alamein, the Battle of El Alamein, of course. I also wonder how the British really feel about the war because, yeah, they won, right? They were part of the Allies, they won, but at the same time, they paid a huge cost for the war, not only in people, but also in resources. And their empire started to crumble after the war. So, I wonder how they really see it. Yes, as a victory, but, it wasn't good for the country, right? They broke the German codes in 1940, so they knew Germany was going to attack the USSR within 2 years. Huh. I actually did not knew that. And of course, now talking about North Africa, the Australians did an amazing job on this front. I think it was the town of Tobruk, but I could be wrong. Which town the Australians fought, and of course the British as well as the people of the Commonwealth fought ferociously in North Africa, and this changed the war. Tripoli in Libya, yeah. But the footage is amazing. I'm glad that this is on YouTube, free for all of us to watch.
"1,700 miles in 120."
Anyone else having issues hearing the stream? I can't hear anything. Huh. Okay, well. Oh, never mind. It's fixed. Okay, cool, perfect.
1,700 miles of sand and wind and enemies. Once more, the people of Britain heard their church bells ring. More than 3 years earlier, they had been warned that this would be the signal of invasion. But long since the nightmare of the threat of invasion had passed. Now the bells rang out a song of thanksgiving, a song of victory.
Yeah. We are quite proud that we lasted as long as we did and that we were on the winning side. The war destroyed many British cities and towns. Oh, yeah, I could see that, yeah.
Now there's the plain and simple truth about Britain. But the fellow that calls the signals on the Axis team knows his only chance of winning is to split our team up. So his team plays a game at which they've had a lot of practice. A game which has conquered half a dozen countries for them. A game called Divide and Conquer. Men like these tell the British we aren't taking the war seriously. They tell the Russians we are letting them down. They tell the British the Russians will sell them out. And they tell us...
It is manifestly ridiculous for the warmonger Roosevelt to tell the American people that they have anything in common with the British. On the contrary.
What?
They are different in every respect.
They are
Well, there are differences, that's true. For instance, we drive on the right side of the road. But in Britain...
Left. You are in Britain. Drive left. Oh, you are, you know, it's a sign to remind the people, hey, you are in Britain, drive left.
We go for baseball.
The British go for football.
Cricket.
Or cricket. And soccer, of course. And rugby, is that a thing that you guys play in the UK?
Very well played, sir.
I mean, it does look kind of similar to baseball, doesn't it?
And anyone who ever drank coffee over there knows why there'll always be an England.
Is your coffee all right, sir?
It's about the tea. Yeah, not great.
Just a glass of half and half. Have you heard about it, boys? Give us another glass of half and half. Blimey, you'd have thought it happened to poor old Bill. And another bloke here.
So I went in to sup my dinner, but it's that buckets and I was getting swarch. He lad, that's bad.
And Mang Tchaikovsky's smaller pianoforte works are past.
Are they kidding, Jack? Why the cockamamie sprinkling some schmaltz mixed with celery tonic?
Why do they all mush so much with corn pone in their mouth? You all can't understand a word they say.
Yes, there are differences. But
I mean, the Scottish accent is extremely... I personally can't understand it. Just straight up. Yeah, we'll play that as well.
Britain and America do have in common. And these are the important things of life. A little thing called a free representative government. We call it Congress.
Language,
They call it
religion.
Parliament. A little thing called freedom of speech.
In the next war, you've not got to go to it. They'll bring the war to you. And the thing is, if you're taking it from me...
I just think it's really stupid to say that America and the UK are the opposite, you know, or they are not similar. Like, come on.
Dorchester.
Come on.
Because the trenches are just outside.
This meeting is called under the auspices of the American Workers' Party, an organization dedicated to the organizing of the working class of America.
Freedom of the press. Freedom of religion. They may not be important to Hitler, but all these things are the common heritage
They
of John
joined
Republic and John Britain.
the UK and the
700
US.
years ago, their ancestors fought for the Magna Carta.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna take a bathroom break, so give me just a quick second, all right? I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Whew. Sorry, a lot of things have happened. I'm gonna have to go out in like an hour. So yeah, and I'm also, because I'm gonna have to go out, I'm also ordering some food. So yeah, it's gonna become a food stream. So I hope you guys don't mind that.
No one will we deny.
Let's continue. Thank you for the people that stayed.
300 years ago, the Petition of Right.
No man shall be compelled to yield any tax without act of Parliament.
These principles came to our own country with the earliest settlers, and from them developed.
Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble.
We may make gags about each other's accents, but we speak the same language of freedom. Even during
The same
American
language of
Revolution,
freedom,
when we were at
yeah.
each other's throats, the Earl of Chatham was free to say about us to the British Parliament,
You cannot but respect their cause and wish to make it your own.
and that is why in the heart of London, alongside his great naval hero, Nelson, John Britton has put
Admiral Nelson,
George
true.
Washington. And in Parliament Square, the most sacred spot in the British Commonwealth of Nations, Abraham Lincoln.
Of course, Hitler doesn't like this kind of talk. His job is to sell the British that we are a nation of money grubbers.
Money grabbers.
And gangsters.
British had a stereotype of being stubborn and hard, so we weren't going out without a fight.
That the British are gutless.
Damn straight.
The John Q. Public and John Britton are entirely different. All right, Hitler, where are these miners? Wales or West Virginia? These farmers, Devonshire or Wisconsin? These steel workers, Sheffield or Pittsburgh? These children, American or British, they live in lands which share the same hopes, the same ideals, and unlike the poor children of Germany, in lands where the truth is free.
Yeah, I could obviously see why they recorded a video like this, so the American soldiers would feel great about the British, or feel like, yeah, we're gonna defend the British.
But let's not kid ourselves. Britain is not the United States, and the United States is not Britain. For instance, we don't go in for this kind of thing. They do.
The
But
wigs,
there's no
yeah.
mystery about that. Remember our grandmother's house? It was old-fashioned, out of date, patched and altered to suit each new generation, and filled with family relics even grandmother couldn't explain. Well, John Britton has been living in his house for a long time. And that's why to us, who live in a modern house that we built ourselves to suit ourselves, John Britton seems slow-moving and cluttered up with ancient traditions. Kings, for instance. The present king rode to his coronation in the same coach, to the same church, for the same ceremony as his ancestors did. But the job he took on is very different from theirs. There have been some changes made, for the British king can no longer make laws or impose taxes or interfere with government. He and his family work as hard as any other citizen, doing the job that the people expect of them. Today, the
Is that
king
Queen
the servant of the
Elizabeth?
people and not its ruler. When an American is arrested and brought to trial, the bailiff calls his case.
The people versus John Doe.
But if such a case were called in Britain, it would be...
The King versus John Doe.
It means the same thing. Today, the British king is the symbol of the people. The British are great fans of the fellow in Buckingham Palace. But when they sing God Save the King, they're not worrying about his health.
God save the
They
king.
mean
It's not
God
about the
bless
queen
British
back then.
people. And the dukes and the earls? But in 1911, the people took away the last remaining power of the lords to block the action of the people's representatives. Dukes and earls don't run the country anymore. Today, there are only two people who do that. John Britton and his wife. They go to the polls, just as Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Public do here, and elect their representatives to the House of Commons. And there they fix the taxes and make the law.
Very democratic.
And if John wanted to get rid of the lords, his representatives in Commons can at any time vote them out of existence. But John doesn't want to get rid of them. So he confuses us by keeping dukes and lords in a country where unions have long been accepted as an essential part of the democratic system, where the Labour Party controls.
Oh, I wonder what he's going to say about
one
unions.
of the two great political parties, where longshoremen and railroad engineers have been ministers of the Crown, and where for 30 years he has had a system of social security even more extensive than our own.
True,
so when you read
true.
about Lord Louis Mountbatten or Lord Beaverbrook, former head of aircraft production, don't think they got their jobs because of their titles. They got them because they were the best men for the jobs. Just as Ernest Bevin, formerly a labor leader and now member of the War Cabinet, Herbert Morrison, who started life as an errand boy and is now Minister of Home Security.
The anthem changes every time we get a new monarch, so when the Queen goes, we'll have God Save the King again.
With the things on the surface, the unimportant things.
But that'll be an interesting change, though. People have saying God Save the Queen for like, what, 60, 70 years?
They run the same way. The democratic way. The free way.
But this gentleman never bothered about the truth. And when John Britain started carrying the war to Germany, he tried a new line.
The warmonger Churchill only wages this war against the German people to save the British Empire.
All right, let's take a look at that one. Here's the British Empire.
Ooh.
And here's where the Germans were headed when Britain declared war. Does that look like trying to save the empire? Tackling Germany when it was headed into Poland and toward Russia? The one direction in which there were no British possessions? After Poland fell,
You got wrecked, son.
Hitler hinted a peace with the British. This was the perfect chance to save the empire. But it wasn't saving the empire that the British were thinking about.
Anthony Eden, I think he would become prime minister, right?
In respect of any peace offer by Hitler. We are not in
Been singing it for 70 years. This year, since from February, will be the 70 years since the Queen became the monarch.
And after Britain had been on the losing end, month after month, it had another chance to save the empire. Even now, Hitler thought John Britain would make a deal. We heard the British answer.
What kind of a people do they think we are?
The Churchill is back.
Is it possible they do not risk
Britain to surrender.
And let's take a look at this British Empire. The freedom we fought for in 1776, Britain has since freely given to Canada, Australia, New Zealand,
And what, South Africa?
South Africa. These are independent nations with their own parliaments, their own laws, even their own money systems, their own tariffs, which often work to Britain's disadvantage, their own armies and navies. Britain couldn't...
I wonder if people will become a lot less fond of the royal family. I mean, it's easy to say, let them be when a sweet old lady's in charge, but when it's an old middle-aged dude, maybe not. That's an interesting question. I have no idea. I think the support for the monarchy will remain, but
Each one of the British Commonwealth
who knows,
nations
honestly.
declared war on Germany of its own free will.
Of course, no one ever talks about the British Empire today without mentioning India.
The crown jewel of the
In
empire.
Britain, as well as other countries, have been outspoken in their demands for Indian freedom. For no man who believes in
The
democracy...
queen will never die. You can look forward to singing it for thousands of
Many
years.
of us do not know about India. For instance, that India pays no taxes to Britain, either directly or indirectly. That the Indians fix their own tariff laws, frequently to Britain's disadvantage. That of the Viceroy's Executive Council, 11 of the 15 members are Indians. And in the courts, 10 of every 11 judges. Furthermore, that no Indian is ever conscripted for service in the Army and Navy. was voluntary enlistment that raised the Indian Army from 170,000 at the outbreak of war to 1.25 million today.
Okay.
And on the subject of India, listen to the words of Field Marshal Jan Christian Smuts. He fought against the British 40 years ago, was defeated in his fight, and still became the leader of one of the British Commonwealths of Nations, Prime Minister of South Africa.
India, if she will, can be free in the same way and by the same means as Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are today free sovereign states. Their peoples worked out a constitution for themselves. The same course is open to India, if the peoples of India will agree about the terms of a free constitution.
Okay, interesting.
Freedom isn't a thing that can be imposed from without. It can only be created from within.
The Indians have a responsibility to reconcile the differences that exist in the vast Indian population, with its 100 different languages, its dozens of different religions. And on March the 11th, 1942, the British government placed itself on record and promised full self-government to India if India will work out a constitution that will satisfy its people after the war is over. But during
And that's
this
what
war,
happened.
military leaders
But then India was left with a whole new other conflict about Pakistan, East Pakistan, India.
Allied troops are
It
needed
wasn't
in India
really peaceful,
as an
but
effective bloc by the democratic world
But
to
hey.
keep the Nazis and Japs from uniting.
oh, the Japs. Oh, come on, dude.
India provides the basis for United Nations bombers to get at the Japs in Burma. In other parts of the empire, too, democracy stands on guard. If it wasn't for the British at Gibraltar, Malta, Cyprus, Suez,
The Patriots.
Alexandria, and they're hanging on to them regardless of the cost, and their drive across Libya to Tripoli, there would have been no American landing in North Africa.
True, that is true. And the American landings in North Africa would eventually become an invasion of Sicily and southern Italy, which would be the first blow to like mainland Europe that Hitler would have. So, you know, it's a big deal.
There's another tune the Nazis play about the British Empire.
The British are sitting back, letting others fight the war for them.
Ooh, we know that tune very well. Britain will fight to the last Australian or Canadian or New Zealander. The truth that thousands of Canadians and Australians and New Zealanders have gallantly fought and gallantly died in Crete, in Greece, in Libya. But there's something the Nazi mouthpiece leaves out, something pretty important. Out of every 10 inhabitants of the British Empire, 1 comes from Britain. But of the casualties suffered so far in this war, 7 out of 10 were born and raised in Britain. 1 of 10 in population, 7 of 10 in casualties.
So yeah, they definitely struggled.
And in the air, of the planes
The Royal
flying
Air
with the
Force.
RAF in Britain, 2 out of 3 are manned by crews from the island. And of the planes on the overseas fronts, the western desert in Africa and the rest, 4 out of 5 are manned by boys from Britain. And then there's a little thing called the British Navy. From 1588, when it licked the Spanish Armada, to 1940, when we got moving on a 2-ocean navy, the greatest battle fleet in the world. That, too, is manned almost entirely by men of Britain, the little island in the Atlantic, an island of seafarers. And the British
Royal
Merchant
Navy, of course,
still
huge.
the greatest merchant navy in the world, in spite of all that Hitler can do. Men from every British town and village in the stokeholds of 10,000 ships, on ice-coated decks, in grimy engine rooms, men who have been torpedoed twice, 3 times. There's one English sailor who's been torpedoed 6 times and still signed on again.
But we
6
never hear
times.
about these things
Holy
because of a
shit.
curious character whose ways will never be completely understandable to an American. John Britton himself. He has an idea he shouldn't talk about himself and what he does.
John Britton,
He
and
calls
it's
bad
always this
form.
guy.
We call it damn silly. He'd say of a Spitfire,
Oh, she's not bad, little kite.
but this man, the boss of the German Air Force, can tell us that the Spitfire has been the most deadly fighter in the world.
Who was the leader of the German Air Force? Hummels? No.
Hello, Bob. Had a good trip?
Himmler, pardon, sorry. Hummels is the
Except that he
football
spent
player,
2
yeah.
days in the icy waters of the North Atlantic after being torpedoed on the way to Murmansk. See this man? His name is Whitten Brown. And this man, believe it or not, is the first man who flew the Atlantic non-stop. In 1990,
Okay.
8 years before anyone else, he and John Alcock flew non-stop from Newfoundland to Ireland. But as usual, the British let it go at that, and Whitten Brown went back into obscurity. There's nothing wrong with John Britton that a correspondence course in showmanship wouldn't cure.
Oh. My food, oh shit, I forgot. My food is outside, guys. Whew. All right. Sorry about that again, you know? It's just I'm hungry, man. This COVID thing makes you hungry. Hermann Göring was the head of the German Air Force. Yeah, true, true, true. Thanks for remembering me.
For a moment, imagine that you're not American, but British. You'd still be in uniform. For in Britain, every man between the age of 18 and 41, unless he cannot be replaced at a vital workbench, is already in uniform. Your old man, too. He's had to quit guessing about the last war, for they're now starting to draft men...
The people who had to serve on both wars?
Dependents or no dependents. If you've got yourself into this mess, your draft board will say, frightfully sorry, old chap, but you're in the Army anyway. And your kid sister, if she isn't a sailor, or in the Air Force, or the Land Army, or a ferry pilot, or in the fire brigade, she's probably in the Army, for they've drafted unmarried women up to 30. And even if she's married, every woman up to 41 can be drafted to work in war plants. And it's a real draft. For 8 million workers, men and women, can't quit their jobs or be fired without government permission. Britain is only 20 miles from German guns and German planes. Everybody, man or woman, young or old, is in the front line.
Maybe this isn't your idea of Britain. The ads were different, and you wondered whether they still made bows and arrows at the village forge. The ads kept quiet about industry, just as this one leaves out the aircraft plants and the oil fields. Well, they have the rich green fields you've read about, the quiet country lanes, but they also have the steel mills of Sheffield, the Pittsburgh of Britain. They have the picturesque little villages, the gently flowing streams, the lovely old castles. But they also have the shipyards of the River Clyde, not as modern as Henry Kaiser's, but still one of the greatest in the world. They have the old cathedrals, deathless reminders of a rich tradition. But they also have the great industrial cities of Birmingham, Glasgow, Manchester, Leeds. They seldom, if ever, saw an American tourist, but they made Britain, even in peacetime, one of the greatest industrial powers in the world. And in wartime, even as late as July 1942, this little island, no larger than the state of Idaho, was making more war goods than we were.
Wow.
Maybe you thought John Britain sat there and waited for us to send him planes and guns and tanks. Well, he's deeply grateful for what our Lend-Lease did for him. It saved his skin when he was in a tough spot. But today, Lend-Lease works in more ways than one. For today, John Britain himself furnishes planes.
My grandmother's older sister were evacuated to the countryside during the war. When the war ended, my great-grandfather went to get her. She could not remember what he looked like after 5 years apart. Damn, that's so sad.
Guns and tanks through the same Lend-Lease.
And I'm guessing a lot of kids had to go through that.
And his other allies all over the world. In Britain alone, our forces have received, free from the British, 1.5 million tons of food, clothing, and munitions, and 2.5 million tons of other materials. There's another thing you ought to know about Britain. If your unit gets sent there, you probably won't be invited out for supper or for a drink. That's not because the British don't want to entertain you. They haven't anything to entertain you with. Britain is mobilized for war, total war, and that means an end to civilian supplies. If you were a Britisher, you wouldn't expect your girl to use lipstick. There isn't any, except what we bring over as bait. She wouldn't be smartly
Okay, this is a
dressed,
little...
or clothes are rationed, severely rationed. It's very unlikely she wears stockings. For if she bought a pair of stockings a month, that would be all the clothes.
This didn't
of any
age so
kind
well,
she
I
could
guess.
buy. That's some rationing. We think our gas rationing is tough, but John Britton gets no gas at all. He goes to a pub to buy a bottle of whiskey. The pub keeper laughs in his
Scotch,
face.
the best whiskey out there.
Grain is needed for industrial alcohol. Industrial alcohol is needed for munitions. And nearly all the reserve stock of British whiskey is kept for sale to America to pay for the goods Britain buys here. For don't forget, besides Lend-Lease, Britain buys and pays for vast quantities of goods. And it was the cash purchases that Britain made before we entered the war that gave our munitions industry its start and enabled us to build it up in record time. He goes to buy a pack of cigarettes. There probably aren't any. But if there are,
2 shillings, please.
that's 40 cents for a pack of cigarettes. 12 cents represent the cost of the cigarettes. The other 28, the tax paid to the government. For Britain is going all out in taxation. Nobody is making any money out of this
And you
war.
know America don't like those
Industry is
taxes.
paying. Excess profits tax is 100%. Labor is paying. The man who earns $33 a week pays 29% income tax.
Wow.
And the rich man, if there are any of them left, pays an income tax of no less than 97.5%.
Whoa.
And then there's the little matter of food. There are not many fat men in
Yo,
England
that's-
nowadays. But John Britton isn't kicking. He knows 1 egg a week is helping him to win the war. The British rations are the rations of a free people. They could get food as they did in peacetime from Canada, Australia. But that would take ships. And the British prefer to use the ships for supplies to Russia, planes from America, troops to the Mediterranean. To win the war, every Britisher is on short rations and has been on short rations for 2 years. Everybody except the children. They get 4 times the eggs that grown-ups do. They get all the
4
oranges
times.
that arrive in Britain.
They are well
And
fed,
practically
yeah.
all of the extra milk. For John Britton is thinking of after the war, of the new world that his children and ours will inherit. A world where there will not only be freedom of speech and freedom of worship, but also freedom from want and freedom from fear.
It is not given to us to peer into the mysteries of the future. Still I avow my hope and faith, sure and inviolate, that in the days to come, the British and American peoples will, for their own safety and for the good of all, walk together in majesty, in justice, and in peace.
This is
Hell
what
yeah.
the British are fighting for. They are an old people, a stubborn people, and sometimes they have moved slowly. But in 3 years of blood and sweat and tears,
They have resisted.
John Britton has found his
They
soul.
persevered.
Now he is tough. Now he is determined, and now he knows where he is marching, to victory and to a new world. He's a good man to have on our team.
Whoa. Yo, this was actually really interesting. I'm guessing it's over now. Yeah. Rationing lasted until the mid-50s. My grandparents remember growing up rationing. They said, you eat what you are giving or go without. That's insane. That's really hard to comprehend because now we're kind of used to food being plenty available, right? But this is a really interesting video. I really want to watch the other ones for the other countries, like Know Your Ally, Know Your Enemy. This one was perfect and perfectly described the America-British relationship at the time. It gave us a brief history of the UK and the World War II efforts that they went through. And I just want to watch the other ones. Guys, I'm really sorry, but I have to end the stream. Something happened and I really gotta go. But I hope you guys are doing well. I hope that you guys are safe. COVID, I can tell you it's tough. So be really careful out there. Try not spreading this thing, or try not to like get it yourself. And thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And I hope that we can continue this stream either tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, but very soon. All right. I'll see you guys later.